Hello, hello everybody. Very nice having you here, and for this panel about, I think, the main topic on this panel is about human rights defense and how the organizations that have been, fighting for human rights defense over the years see the potential of blockchain, Bitcoin, and all these new technologies. I mean, because I think in the recent years, we have seen in the crypto space or in the blockchain space, a lot of projects that maybe think that technology is enough to change the things. And I think, those on the ground, those on the territory actually doing the fight for many, many years, understand that fighting for these rights or protecting the human rights is much tougher than technology. So I think, I always say I'm not a techno-optimist. I think technology is an innovation tool, and of course it changed the landscape of human beings, but it's us human beings that give a direction to technology and can put it to the service of society or not. So before getting deep into this, I would love to get a brief introduction of each one of you. Maybe we can start with you, Janine, then we will move to the other panelists.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. My name is Janice Vaca. I work at the Human Rights Foundation. We are a human rights organization, a nonprofit that is based in New York, but we have people working in different parts of the world, and we partner with activists that have been using blockchain, so I'm very excited to tell you about that.
Thank you. Javier, do you want to?
Hi, everyone. My name is Javier Pariero. I am an Argentinian, saying hi to you from Cordoba, Argentina, and I work as the Global Policy Director at Access Now, an international organization that defends and extends the digital rights of users at risk.
And our last panelist, very well-known good friend of mine.
Good. I'm Federico Ast. I am CEO at Cleros.
I think your sound is coming a little bit low.
Okay. Maybe. Can you hear me now? Are you okay? It was working in the previous room.
Now it's much better.
Okay. So I'm Federico Ast. I am CEO at Cleros. And well, what we do at the company is that we use blockchain to transform justice systems and to make dispute resolution. And this can help to the goal of more justice inclusion in different societies.
Thank you. Thank you, Fede. So, and I think, one of the key elements I think in these technologies bring is the ability to self-organize. So I think your topic, what you are building, like having a self-organized way of resolving our disputes is a great example of that. So going to the point, so maybe the first question is like, for those who are doing the work on the ground to actually fight for human rights, I mean, what are the main difficulties you find? I mean, what are the main difficulties you find? I don't know, please share it openly from financial perspective, operational perspectives. Like, what are the challenges you face regardless of the technology? What are the challenges that you face? Maybe, Javier, you can start. And so I will go shuffling you around so you all speak. So
Okay, great. So I think I'm brought here to be like the dissenting voice in the use of blockchain in terms of work, because in the experience that I've had and in the work that we do as an international human rights organization, we actually don't use it so much. We have known of experiences of usage of blockchain technologies to extend the digital rights of users, to help with the documentation of certain issues that require documentation, such as human rights violations and issues of the sorts. I think that there is a huge potential to implement and to help bring more of these technologies into specific areas of work, like, for example, the enforcement of data protection rights, the documentation of content moderation decisions by big platforms, for example, and how those takedowns are preserved for cases, for example, where they can serve as evidence for human rights violations, and several other examples that we can get there. But honestly, I think that the main challenge there is lack of communication between the more technical community working on blockchain-related technologies and other activists, right? This is often sometimes related maybe to the way in which blockchain is so associated to Bitcoin, and the way in which this is seen as an economic or speculation issue, right? Maybe also probably has to do with the environmental impact that sometimes is criticized about the way in which blockchain works. But I think that some of those issues and the lack of communication between communities is one of the main challenges that I can see in the work.
What about because maybe, sorry, I was not clear. It was not about the challenges with blockchain, but the challenges your organization face, like outside blockchain, like in general. What are the main, blockers you have to do your activity, or what are the, yes?
Where to start? Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. We have two big sets of challenges. One of them has to do with companies and the lack of transparency and lack of engagement that they have. I'm talking about really big companies where they call often like big tech, right? And the way in which they engage with their products and their customers and users, just in the way in which their decisions can affect their rights, especially on data protection and freedom of expression. And on the other side, another big challenge for us is governments. The main violators of human rights are still governments around the world. Companies are increasingly getting there into some very bad practices, but the number one concern that we have in several places in the world where we work is governments and their actions.
So excellent. So one of the challenges is, like, as you say, about protecting the organizations fighting for these rights, and because you are fighting, I would say, like big forces of society, it's governments, corporations, and so that's one thing. You also mentioned in your previous words about like having reliable sources of data, that data that cannot be manipulated or deleted. So I think the blockchain can provide a good tool there. So Janine, what you would say on your side? We had Alex Gladstein, sharing more about your organization, but I think it's purposeful for the people listening to us or seeing us. What are the stoppers that the Human Rights Foundation is facing more deeply?
Well, I think it's very important to explain. I actually run this program in the Human Rights Foundation. It's called the Freedom Fellowship. So we collaborate with activists that are actually fighting for democracy and human rights in different dictatorships or authoritarian regimes around the world. So looking at the challenges that they constantly face and the experience of our fellows themselves, I think two things that come to mind as to what are the main obstacles are, number one, privacy, and number two, finance. I think in terms of privacy, we've often seen, and this has happened not only to Freedom Fellows of HRF, but people within our community, that hacking their accounts, using their personal information, making it public, sharing things that are personal from their personal chats, WhatsApp, Facebook, Twitter, etc., is something that happens often. So that is one main challenge that we still need to face, because there are amazing organizations like Access Now, and they're here present today, that can give help to these activists when these things happens. But what happens is, when you live under an authoritarian regime, it is rare that you have the chance to go to international conferences and meet people who can help you with these challenges. So often the activists are battling with these attacks, with this internet media attacks on their own. And then the second thing, and I think this is somewhere where blockchain can be extremely useful, and we have seen it being useful in our experience, is that more than not, the organizations, the civil society organizations from which these activists are working, are not recognized as legal in their countries. And this makes it extremely impossible for them to apply to grants, to get funding from NGOs within and outside of their countries. And more than not, we've seen this with activists in our community as well. Their bank accounts are frozen. So that makes it very difficult for them to even move their own personal money, not even thinking about the money they usually use for their human rights projects. So it's very difficult to get around those things. I think with blockchain, we've had good experiences of how we can get around those obstacles, but they are very important. And I think spaces like this one are super important to make activists feel connected to people that can actually help them with these challenges.
So I think that, take us, I think you raised amazing points that clearly I think, Bitcoin was built with that goal of having sovereign finance or being sovereign about the economy, and then the blockchain, protocols built afterwards like Ethereum and others have extended capabilities to solve other problems like identity. There's also a lot of work on sovereign identity, self-sovereign identity in Bitcoin, Ethereum, RSK. Different protocols are like working heavily on that, and I think that raises also like a big topic for society in general, because people is not very conscious of course in the extreme environments you were mentioning, like protecting your privacy is a life or death situation in many cases. So it's clear why privacy is important in those contexts. But I think we have been giving away our privacy for many years, I would say for more than a decade, without even thinking on the consequences of that. No? So I think like that's another thing that maybe in the crypto world, in the cyberpunk philosophy behind all these models we have been building, this concept of protecting your privacy and that protecting or caring about your privacy is not a crime. It's something we have in our DNA, but it's not commonplace among the population. So I think we have identified at least 3 interesting things. So privacy protection, then of course funding, and I think WikiLeaks was a great example. No, the credit cards, the main credit cards shut down WikiLeaks funding, and thanks to Bitcoin, WikiLeaks I think not only managed to keep going, but got stronger. No? So I would say, given that we have a top expert among us, like is Fede. Fede, can you tell us like a little bit of how do you think, and also Javier was mentioning about governance. No? So can you share a little bit of how these technologies can help on the privacy protection, identity management, on the funding, censorship resistance, and on the governance things? What are these technologies bringing to the table?
Well, at Kleros, we work very closely with the people who are from Venezuela, for example, and from different parts of Africa, where basically they are having problems with their bank accounts. They are frozen. They have problems with, of course, being persecuted by government agents. And in a way, the world, the centralized digital world, is going to kind of, if you want, Chinese Communist Party situation where you have this huge big entity which controls everyone's identity, everyone's bank account, everything. And like if you for some reason happen to disagree with what the government or the authority wants to do, so like they just switch you off the system and you are like done, right? So we have the extreme version of this in China, for example, but also there are like Western versions of this, like Facebook, for example. So this we have not maybe taken enough, or what we are just taking right now, awareness of how powerful these organizations are and how impactful they are on our rights to everything. I always say that Facebook is it's more like a state than a company. It's like a big virtual state that controls our identity. They make the rules where all the users interact. They also have a justice system. If you violate, if they say you violate the terms and conditions of the service, and they can like just kick you out of the platform and they exile you. So I think that we are just now starting to realize that we are living in this, if you want, absolute monarchies, that is the centralized internet. And we, myself at Kleros, but also many other people like, Santi, Syria, Democracy Earth, or, lots of people at RSK building this type of projects. We are building the governance infrastructure for the next generation of the internet. And, the next generation of the internet is the next generation of the world, because the world is going to be digital. So we need to get this right, because if we get the governance wrong, then we end up in a quite high risk of ending in the kind of gamified China Communist Party system controlling every aspect of our lives.
So we can say that, well, that was mentioned, but we are not protecting these rights only from governments. We have a new kind of ruler, or there are corporations, big corporations that also have been controlling more and more of the internet. No, that's I think the internet was born, or the web was born with a decentralized spirit, or at least that was what we wanted. Those who were part of the early days of the web, we wanted that decentralization spirit to grow and build. But now we see centralization emerge as a pattern, and I think you're right, Fede. I think blockchain is the foundations for a peer-to-peer, regaining the internet control and creating peer-to-peer protocols. So, but how is access now? Because I think you are activist, no? So you actually do a lot of things. So what are you doing, to protect these rights, or to help the internet stay decentralized, stay open, and to the service of individuals?
Well, that's a very good point. I mean, we have several arms that work on that issue. We have a policy arm that puts together the main points of thinking that are going to inform our actions. We have an advocacy arm that does campaigns and engages lawmakers and puts together resources to generate change. We also have a digital security helpline, which is more on the reactive side, where we provide 24/7 support to activists who have high security risks in terms of digital security. So that's very interesting. We had 10,000 cases only on 2020 about people wanting to get help about this. No, sorry, 10,000 cases historically since we founded the helpline of people trying to get help on this front on different places of the world. So this is a very interesting question. I think that there is a reactive element, which is to try to resist legislation and policies that aim at destroying the capabilities of users or exerting control of their own information and of their own experience. One of them, for example, is resisting attempts at breaking encryption that from time to time come back, with these statements from the Five Eyes governments that from time to time get repeated, like saying we're going dark, encryption is a threat for security or to catching the bad guys, and they always bring the what Assange, I think, if I'm not mistaken, used to call the apocalypse horsemen, right? Like terrorism or child porn or drug trafficking and so on. So it's the same thing there. I'm not saying that these are not important and very serious issues, and that there are real challenges around getting those fixed in terms of technology. But they sometimes are used as scapegoats to try to get all kinds of secure encryption, end-to-end encryption banned, or to try to get backdoors there. This is the old, very, very old battle that we have been fighting. And on the other side, on the side of what Federico said about big companies and how some of these practices have to do, well, we engage a lot on content moderation, content governance. We are now engaging on the Digital Services Act, a legislation in the European Union that aims at putting some regulation over online information gatekeepers, right? To make them accountable about their content moderation practices, to try to get more transparency, more control over what they do. And ideally, through competition law, we can also probably try to address the issue of the concentration, which is, again, as Federico said, something that is actually subverting the very nature of the internet, which is decentralization and interoperability.
Excellent, excellent. Indeed, in the late 90s, I was part of the web, and there was a ban for cryptography exports from the US. So there was a big fight, and DGB, a great cryptographer, did the fight and won. And thanks to that, we have, cryptography has exploded outside. But, as you say, these are waves that keep coming to block the use of tools that actually what cryptography does is protects the little guy and little girl, the little girl and the little guy, because it's basically, what it does is provides tools that have asymmetric powers, that defending yourself require much less energy or resources than attacking. So that asymmetry between the attacking effort and the defense effort is what creates, turns cryptography into a tool of defense of the individuals versus the big power. So when they are attacking cryptography, they are not attacking a mathematical model or a piece of software. They are attacking every individual's right. But we need to create, and I think what you mentioned is like you are doing a lot of work on advocacy, on educating people. I mean, of course, you have the defensive part, but also you have this part where you create this awareness, this conscious. So that's great. And Janice, I know you mentioned you are part of the Freedom Fellowship, and you do also like very specific actions, to help and protect human rights. So can you share a little bit of what you do as well, so people know what you are doing in these directions?
Yeah, of course. So essentially my specialization is nonviolence, and I work at the Human Rights Foundation running the Freedom Fellowship program, which is a one-year program that supports activists that are working in defense of human rights and democracy in authoritarian regimes. And at the same time, on my free time, I do a lot of activism myself. So it's been really interesting what you have all been discussing, how technology can be used in a constructive or destructive way. It depends on what we do with it. And in that sense, I think it's also really important, and this is something that we try to do with the Freedom Fellowship, where we teach the fellows, for example, how to use cryptocurrency. And at the same time, in the Also Freedom Forum events, we have events where we gather activists from all around the world. We try to expose them to the newest advances in technology so that they can make a better use of it in behalf of their causes. But the problem lies, and I think this is where, again, spaces like this are super important, that most activists, and I can give an example of myself, I do a lot of activism in my country, in Bolivia, where cryptocurrency, by the way, is not legal, don't have the opportunity to talk directly with the people behind the technology that are developing the technology, to explain to them how this can be useful for human rights, but also how can this be harmful for human rights. So it's very rare that you see organizations like the Human Rights Foundation, where, for example, we have the Belarus Solidarity Fund, in which we use big cryptocurrency in order to help activists that are working in Belarus. But usually these spaces don't really exist as much. So it's very important that we continue to expose and to explain to people that if you are working on new technology, new developments, and not just on technology, in any area of human work, you have to bear in mind the consequences that this work can have, positive and negative, to people that are now living under authoritarian regimes, because those people do exist. It's 4.2 billion of people on Earth. And usually a lot of people living in the free world don't really think about them.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Janice. I think it's awesome. I think, how do you think, from a financing perspective, I think Bitcoin already did, and then all the cryptocurrencies that are in existence already did a great job, and it's a constant work, to provide more privacy, to provide, to protect in the transactional environment, it's already brought a tool to avoid or overcome the blockages. But I think the other two topics are identity and governance. So, Fede, how do you think these technologies can help the identity protection or the privacy protection of people? I mean, maybe in more concrete ways. It's like, what are the models out there for privacy protection on the identities?
Yeah, so the thing now is that identity is fractured into different silos, if you want. Traditionally, people's identity was recorded by who? By the church, right? That they were those who recorded birth and death and marriages, and then so we had the nation states taking that role, and now after that, in the late 10 years and 15 years, so who knows more about our identity? The internet companies, Facebook knows everything about that. They know who we are, where we are, who our friends are, where we travel, so everything. And if we want to leave Facebook because we are fed with it, but we lose all of our identity because we can't take our reputation and all of our network to some other place. We just either we stay at Facebook in their network with their rules, or we have to go like live alone in the mountains without being connected to anyone. And this is true, not just Facebook. I always take Facebook because, yeah, everyone likes to hit Facebook, but also Google and all the big companies. The thing is that self-sovereign identity would mean that like any of us having like a little like black box that we own, and with all of our information there that we can share with whoever we want. Like I have my biometry there, my residence, my reputation as a driver, my reputation as a writer, as a whatever. And then this is a cryptographically secure box, and I can share only parts of that with whoever I want. And I am the only one who owns this thing, right? So let's say I want to go into a bar and they will ask me, oh, are you over 21? So now you have to show them your ID, and then they know your age, of course, but they also know where you live, they know your photo, you know. So if I have this identity in my phone, my centralized identity app, I could like only share my age and not having the other guy know everything about me, right? So this is very important. And also, yeah.
So in a way, what you're saying is like with these technologies, we can regain control of our data, but not only that, but also choose what to share, which is not the case today. We are sharing like monolithic part of information, and that takes me to another thing that I think is key in these technologies, that is we need to have multiple personas. I mean, the identity is a social construct. It's not, I mean, one part is I state saying who I am and where I was born, who my fathers are. That's one thing, but identity is a social event. It's like the building of interactions with others that build who I am, and I can choose to share a part of those interactions with some group of people and other parts of those interactions with other group of people. And that's also, and you mentioned something that is very important, is the physical, like biometric information. Who I am on a physical level should be protected to the maximum possible, because I think that's when your vital, your life is at stake. So I think if we start creating these pseudonymous or multiple personas that we use to interact in different environments, and we protect our physical persona, then we have a model that can help in the environments, in the harsh environments that were mentioned before. No? So we have, these new technologies can provide tools for funding, can provide tools to create a better identity model, a privacy protecting identity model, and to protect the information. And I think Javier already stepped into the final thoughts, or it's like why this is not like, meeting. I mean, the needs are clear on one side. The technology has the potential to solve most of the needs that you were mentioning on the activist realm. Why both worlds are not meeting, or why we are not seeing more and more of this technology being used in the context of human rights protection?
As I said before, maybe it has to do with an issue of lack of communication with the more technical activists that are following the development of blockchain-based technologies. But there's also this perception, right? This idea that there is a high environmental impact, that there is questions about the scalability, that there's questions about the technical elements and how they could be translated into usable, easy to understand and to use technologies and stuff like that. I see a lot of potential for this, but again, as I see, there's this perception, these ideas of the negative sides of it. And on the other side, maybe the lack of communication with the activists that work on it. So maybe that can sort out the issues. Excellent.
So we in the crypto space need to work on create a better perception on the activism world of these environments and these technologies. Janine, your thoughts on why these two worlds are not meeting enough or finding each other enough?
I think it depends a lot on which context you're looking at it, because in the case of activists that work in competitive authoritarian countries, or even activists that are working in democracies themselves, it's a lot about what Javier is mentioning, about education, about making this easier to understand for people that are outside this realm. And then when you think about activists that are working in closed societies and more dictatorships, difficult environments, you have to understand that something as simple as access to the internet is virtually impossible for people in Eritrea, for example, or in North Korea. So it's going to be, there are other factors that make it difficult for them to even access the most basic needs to make this kind of technology work. And in that sense, I don't think it's something that cannot be closed. I think this gap can also be worked on, and we are trying to work on it from different angles. But again, I think the simply listening more to activists, listening to the people that are on the first line and what the challenges they are living through are, would be a great first step to start closing this gap. So communication, again, and education comes to be the main ingredient that seems to be missing.
Amazing. Hopefully these talks and having Alex on La BitConf is the first step for those channels to keep, being more frequent, more fluid. And from from an industry perspective, Fede, what do you think? I mean, do you agree with it's all about communication? Do you think there's other things that need to happen for this technology to be at the service of human rights groups and organizations?
Yeah, I agree with what they say. I think that we should have in mind that new technology have diffusion curves and they take time to become mainstream. Like the World Wide Web was born, I think, in 1990 with the paper of Tim Berners-Lee. But like the internet as a consumer big phenomena, it didn't take off until like more or less mid or late 90s, right? So Satoshi Nakamoto published the paper in 2008. Ethereum and all these new smart contract platforms, of course, as RSK, and I'm a huge fan of what you build. This is very new, and it takes time for people to understand, for people to see the use cases. But I think that when this starts to take off, it's going to be so exponential and so fast that it's going to be hard for like the late comers to catch up. Because as I think it was Richard Buckminster Fuller that said that you don't fight the existing order by fighting it, you fight it by building something that makes it obsolete. So I think that's what we are doing, and over time this is going to be clear for everyone, I think.
Amazing. So you think it's part of the evolutionary process, but the conditions over time will improve and this connection will stay. And as Janice also stated, there are other technological things that need to be solved as well if we want to use these tools like, around the globe in all conditions. So I think we ran out of time, but I think we presented the problem, the opportunity as well, and hopefully this conversation is like will trigger more and more conversations, and we'll see maybe in the next La BitConf a year from now we'll see interesting use cases of this technology for the human rights defense and fight. So thank you all for your time and for sharing your thoughts. It was very pleasant, and see you all. Keep enjoying La BitConf.
Thank you.
Thank you.
How about you?
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.